called Matrix 1.5, and the Matrix 1.5 gives you some behind-the-scenes stuff and things in it, but it also has one of 9 of the segments that are going to be in a DVD that's going to be released here a little later this summer called The Animatrix. And The Animatrix is really parallel stories that are going on with the first episode and the second and third, and they're done in Japanese anime type film. There were a lot of people that saw that first version at some of the promos at the theaters here in the last couple of months. I think the first one's called The Last Flight of the Osiris, and that particular segment is the one that was released on Matrix 1.5. That was a story that involves a character which was not in Matrix 1. She is going to be in Matrix 2 and 3. She is Morpheus' old girlfriend that comes back into a love interest in Matrix Reloaded and Matrix Revolution. And she is involved in, the Osiris is another vessel like the Nebuchadnezzar, and it's desperately trying to get a message to the people living in Zion, which are the free people that have been out of the Matrix, and they're living deep inside the earth. And the message that's getting to them is, I believe, a warning that they're in danger. In this second episode, the machines are supposed to be burrowing into the earth to try to destroy the remnants of the people that are living in Zion. And that's part of the story that's going on in number 2. The majority of the story is that the Oracle has told our friend Neo that if they're going to get into the Matrix to be able to release more of the people, that they need to catch the Keeper of the Keys, and that he is a programmer that has the keys, if you will, to unlock various ports and entries into the Matrix world. And so the majority of this second Matrix Reloaded is the concept of trying to go in and secure the Keeper of the Keys, bring him out of the Matrix so that they can get the information that it will take to go unlock the Matrix and get massive amounts of people out of the Matrix. The final scene, from what I understand, is that freeway scene in which they have extracted the Keeper of the Keys, and Trinity has that person on the back of that Ducati, and they're trying to get to a port so that they can transfer out of the Matrix. And on the freeway, which is still within the Matrix, you have all of the agents that are desperately trying to prevent the agents of Zion from extracting the Keeper of the Keys. So, sounds like an interesting story. We have had interesting things happening with people that are going into trials at sentencing. And in the past, many patriots have known that during a sentencing hearing after the defendant, the straw man, has been found guilty, that the first thing that the judge will usually say is, do you have anything to say before I pass sentence? Speaking to the living soul, the one who's standing in front of the judge. And usually the sentencing hearing is conducted at some period of time after the defendant has been found guilty in a trial. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be a separate hearing, but most of the time it is for many reasons. In times past, the patriots have said that when the judge asks you, do you have anything to say before I pass sentence, that time that the person standing in front of the judge has an opportunity to speak to the court, is generally called allocution, A-L-L-O-C-U-T-I-O-N. And most of the patriots have believed that the allocution time was the time that the patriots had after they were found guilty to basically, quote, start their appeal, unquote, by mentioning everything in the world that they believed that the court system and the legal system did, which was inappropriate, illegal, unconstitutional, non-fair play, whatever it is you want to talk about, so that they can tell the court why, quote, the judge or the court has no lawful or legal jurisdiction, or why it is that I'm the good guy and I ought to go home, and why you people should be ashamed of yourself for what you did or didn't do, or whatever. And so in the past, most of the time, the patriots in allocution used that as a time to charge the judge, the prosecutor, the grand jury, anybody else, everybody else, nobody in particular, with everything that was wrong, which is why I shouldn't go to jail or be punished. Now, in the past couple of months here, we've seen a lot of the people that are using the acceptances and the returns, the going to peace on a lot of these issues, getting some really strange and different results in this whole allocution thing, doing different approaches. And in the last couple of weeks, we've talked about at least 3 or 4 different things that have been going on with some of the people out west with different results. We talked about the fact that my friend Nick went in there and he basically apologized to the court for his previous actions. He reminded the court of the pre-plea agreement for certain things to happen. He told the court that he was sorry for what he had done. Won't happen again. He agreed with the court that certain things are probably reasonable, like charging court costs and some fines. And the judge basically came back after he was done with his talk and basically gave Nick, in his sentencing, everything Nick had agreed to accept. One of the other guys that was there the same day that Nick was and before then came in, and he had basically accepted the judgment, returned it to the court, asked if they put it in the record. The judge agreed and asked him if he wanted to say anything else. And after being taunted several times to say something, he basically came back and told the judge that he didn't believe that the sentence ought to include jail time, fines, or court costs. And the judge looked at him and politely asked him if it would be okay if we could postpone sentencing for 30 days. And when the guy looked confused and looked at his friends, they reminded him by mouthing their lips that you can't argue or fight with the judge or argue the issues or you're in dishonor and you'll lose. So he just said to the judge, okay. Then the judge said to him, would it be okay if during those 30 days we sentence you for a mental exam? And again, he was a little more perturbed, but he agreed that he wouldn't object to that. And when they left court, they started talking about it, and everybody said to this guy, what, are you crazy? You can't tell a judge you can't sentence the convicted defendant. Either you think he's crazy if he takes you up on that, or you must be crazy, and the judge opted for the latter, so that's why you're going to your mental exam. Then we had a third guy that went in a week later, and the judge asked him if he'd read his sentencing report, and he said no, and the judge says, well, let's take some time out and you can read it. And he goes, nope, not necessary, just sentence me. And the judge says, no, you don't understand. You're going to read that report first. And he goes, no, the report's irrelevant. Sentence me. And the judge says, we are not moving forward until you read that report. And the kid basically got in an argument with the judge that it wasn't necessary. So the judge says, we're suspending the sentencing hearing for 30 days. We're appointing a time for you to go get a mental exam. So we've had several experiences at sentencing. We have another guy out west that's been in jail for several years. He's never been tried. He's in jail on contempt for never helping the public. He's in a criminal case and a civil case. He finally started seeing the light about 6 weeks, 2 months ago, and said that he accepted everything and wanted to settle. They brought the criminal case is in a state court. They brought a magistrate or a judge in, sat down at a hearing with the prosecutor, the public pretender, our friend, and this magistrate or judge. And the judge started out just to make the record and said that in this state, in the last 4 years, the state legislature has permitted judges to sit in on settlement conferences and hearings if they feel it will be helpful. I think this will be helpful, so if you don't mind, I'll set in on this hearing. Now, the interesting aspect of this case was this was not the judge which 2 years earlier had been appointed for this case. And so the judge sat in on that, and things went well. Now, during the time the judge was there, he was giving the ground rules, and he said straight out, in behalf of, quote, the defendant, unquote, he said, in this state, if you go to trial and you're found guilty in trial, the statutes mandate the minimum sentence that must be given if you're found guilty. If you try to settle this before trial, basically he said there are no statutes that mandate any minimum anything. And it's in the discretion of the judge. What did the judge just say? He basically said, if you go to trial, you're a debtor and your punishment is mandatory prison. If you settle it out front and you do it well, in terms of the private and become the creditor, the magistrate or the judge has a lot of capacity to sentence whatever way he wants to go. So basically, the judge said then to the offender that was there, I don't want this to influence you. Yeah, like, right. If you believe you're really innocent, like, hello, who are you? Are you the defendant or the offender? If you really believe you are innocent, you should go to trial. Yeah, like, right. Like this isn't a stacked game. So what happened is they reached a settlement agreement, and then the preliminaries and the reports came out. What was interesting in this case is about 3 to 4 days, there's your 3 days again, after the event, there was a filing in this court case on the public side that said the following. Judge Joey is now the official judge in this case. He was the guy that was sitting in the settlement hearing. What just happened? He wasn't the judge that was on the original case. What just happened? If you change the judge, you change the case. There is no provision to change judges in a case. When a case is filed, there is a wheel draw and a judge gets appointed. The only way that judge gets off the case is if he's dead. And then I'm not so sure they'd take him off the case and substitute anyone else anyway. Otherwise, if there were provisions to change judges, everybody'd be using them to go judge shopping. And the whole purpose of assigning a judge to a case is so that you can't go shopping for your judge. So what just happened here? Well, if you change the pleadings, don't you change the case? Now, this guy was in front of the old judge for 2 years in warfare, wasn't he? The offender. And all of a sudden, he apologized and changed his pleading. Didn't he just change the whole case? And so the judges, the prosecutors, nobody ever acknowledged that publicly. But when this came out 3 days after that settlement hearing and said he's the official judge on this case, I said to the people that are helping this guy, I said, I think that's their subtle way of telling you that they've accepted the new pleadings and now it's a different case. Everything that was screwed up before and kept him in jail for 2 years on contempt is gone. I think that's where they're going and what they were doing. There's very subtle things that are happening. If you go in there and you start trying to explain, oh yeah, I've accepted this, I'm the creditor, I'm in control, I want this, you will never ever get any acknowledgement verbally or physically or visually probably that's going to directly tell you that these people have a clue that they know what you're doing at any level and that they acknowledge that you have a right to do that. But every now and then there's very subtle things that come through like this that give you an indication of feedback of what's going on in these matters. So you had this guy that's going in for settlement too. And he seems to be doing stuff pretty well. Now, we were looking at the concept of what was it, like in Nick's case, he went in and he did the apologies and everything, and the judge moves forward. He does the settlement. Nick's released. He goes home. Nick sees the magistrate privately, not by going to visit him. He just happened to be walking down the court hallway the next day, and he pops in right next to the judge, pure accident. And the judge says hello to him with a real nice smile on his face. And the judge says to Nick, hey man, if you petition me now that the sentencing and everything is over, if you petition me